Hello, everyone, and welcome to Snap Take. This is Glazer of Snap Judgments, and today we have something ridiculously special for you. We have our full breakdown of the top 8 decks of the Golden Gauntlet, Marvel Snap's first ever tournament that was officially held by Second Dinner, and we've got comments, descriptions, everything from all of the top 8 players. That's right. All top 8 players have their thoughts in this. Golden Gauntlet was an amazing event with almost 400 participants, and we crowned a champion. I'm not going to make you wait to see the championship deck for anyone who missed it somehow. It was all over social media. It was been all over the place. But Derek took home the Golden Gauntlet completely undefeated throughout the tournament, playing of all decks a bounce deck in which I think the newest card is Toxin, which came out like 6 months ago. This is an extraordinarily powerful list, but it is a really interesting one. We're going to have to see Derek's thoughts and comments on it as we go forward, because before the tournament, no one would have thought this one was a meta deck. Derek is the creator of this list. He was number one on the Infinite leaderboard last August and September and has been number two numerous other times. He plays exclusively his own homebrews. He is a largely free to play player. He occasionally gets season passes, but outside of that, he is not a player who owns every card, and he was able to compete at the absolute top of the meta by just playing great tight snap. For this list, you're going to need Hitmonkey and Nico Minoru. Toxin, if you're missing Toxin, can be Grandmaster. That is a major loss. But what you would ultimately want to do with the Grandmaster, if you have it, is use Beast in a corner lane and then use Grandmaster to push that Beast to the mid, bouncing other stuff. That's worse in a Thanos meta, but it is an acceptable play. Silver Sable here can be Hawkeye. Hawkeye is in some other prominent bounce players versions of the list, usually not over Sable, usually over Rocket and Groot, but Rocket and Groot is more power if you can predict what your opponent is doing, and open deck lists, like this tournament was, offer you a better opportunity to do that than a ladder or conquest situation. So I asked people mostly the same questions. First was why you chose the deck you chose. So Derek chose Bounce, and this is his direct quote. There wasn't really any other reason than I wanted to play a Bounce deck, so I just made a few tweaks to make it have the best chance into Thanos. You might notice, if you've been paying attention to my channel, we had Derek's Bounce list as the number one list in Marvel Snap last week. He was playing it at the number one spot on the Infinite leaderboard. He has since fallen to either number two or number three, but that's where he was playing it. He also notes, I cut Sage for Iron Man and Shadow King for Bast. Then Surge for. Nope, Surge can't be for Iron Man. Surge has to be for a different card. Let's take a quick look, because he said Surge for Iron Man, excuse me. Uh, Surge ended up becoming Bishop. And they were to compete for Cosmo lanes and turn 6 alive. Oh, sorry, Surge. Boom, boom, boom. Shadow King for Iron Man, Surge for Bast. Yeah, okay. And then the idea here is that you need to compete with Cosmo. Cosmo is in almost every Thanos deck, and if you have to compete with Cosmo, Iron Man gives you a way to play into those lanes. Bast giving your cards 3 power to base really, really does help with that as well. Meanwhile, to stop Alioth, you need to at least compete for Prio, and you need to get enough power out early to do so. Iron Man offers you both of those things. Bast giving power to your earlier plays offers that as well. Alioth, it turns out, was not, just for the record, in any of the successful Thanos decks. We're going to talk a lot about Thanos in the rest of the video. This is Derek's section. Let's keep going. So I then asked everyone what went right. How did you get as far as you did? In Derek's case, what went right in your run? So not getting combo players in the early rounds and snapping or treating appropriately on locations. Also the fact that most of the Thanos decks didn't seem to understand how much power I can output on turn 6, even when I get Mobiused. So let's break this down quickly. So this deck is very weak into combo. This just straight up dies to negative. Anything that puts up just more points than this, like a bounce move list, anything that's trying to combo off major points, puts up more points than Derek's list. However, with 40 to 50% of the field being Thanos, he didn't have to worry about that. There are bad locations for any bounce deck, and in those locations, especially if they show up in the early rounds, you can just run on a snap on them relatively easy without having to stay in for any big cubes. That's a really, really powerful situation to put yourself in. And finally, that this deck can put up so many points even when Mobius. Remember that a Bastard Mysterio is, whether there's a Mobius or not, you could just play that card, right? It's not going to be any cheaper. That is a 2/9, so you're putting power in every lane, and then you can, if you hit a Rocket and Groot for the second time, you're putting up another 1/9, and obviously a Hitmonkey at that point is perfectly playable, as that Hitmonkey would get 2, 4, 6, 8 extra power being a 311. That's a lot of power. The Thanos players didn't really understand or focus on that, instead focusing on that Mobius was stopping them and snapping on ideas like that Mobius. This list isn't running Black Swan. It's not reliant on that ability to get that extra energy out in that way. It's capable of competing otherwise. I asked most people what went wrong, why they lost. Since Derek never lost, that question was not necessary. We asked how it felt to win undefeated and how he felt overall. So it felt pretty hype, but he was really sleepy at the end since it was late for him. He is in the European time zones. He'd rather not get any more information than that, although if you scour enough of my older videos, you can find out where he's from. It felt great to win the first major tournament, and I hope we get more. Stay tuned later in the video for more on major tournaments and what we'd like to see in them. We have a lot more on that. Huge congrats to Derek. Let's continue to break down this deck card by card and then turn by turn. So Hood using either 2 or 3 times, a reminder that you have 3 bounce cards in this list, is absolutely wild. Demons at 1/6 are some of the most powerful stuff in the game, but if you can manage to Hood Bast or later turn Hood into a demon with Nico or use it to draw, you're really cooking. As soon as you get +6 power from that Bast on Hood, things are going amazingly well for this deck. That is fundamentally how the Hood works here. He is one of your secret power cards. He's probably the 3rd power card after Monkey and Iron Man in this list. Silver Sable being played once is a 1/2, but if your opponent plays the card that she has hit, she plays for a 1/4. Remember that the power on the opponent's side of the board and the power on your side of the board is how you can calculate these cards. That's why Scream we consider a +4 scalar. Silver Sable, which means if she's bounced and you play her twice, especially if before the last turn, she can play for a 1/8, 1/6 to 1/8. That's amazing power for 1-drop. You're more than happy to play her, especially because she can hit something very important. There's a decent amount of Surfer in the meta. Hitting something like a Brood can be backbreaking for opponents, hitting a Captain Carter. Bast, meanwhile, gives cards like Hood and Sable, also Rocket, and yeah, that's it. Rocket and Iron Man, real buffs. So Sable starting at a 3 is obviously huge. A +6 on the Hood, a Rocket that starts at 3, and Iron Man is at a 5/3. It's fundamentally a 5/6, right? Because he's doubling his power. All of that's incredible. Mysterio is the other really key target here. If you hit Mysterio with Bast, what you end up with is a 2/9. You lose the 4 power on the real Mysterio, but all the clones become 3 power, so you just get a 2/9 that's going to work as 3 different plays for both Hitmonkey and buff that Bishop by 3 as well. Rocket Raccoon, if you can hit with it twice, is a 1/9. That's absurd. There are games where you hit with it 3 times and you just sing, right? Like if this is a 1/14, you feel like you've won the game. That is just such cheap nonsense at that point that like you're just rocking the entire board. Nico Minoru, meanwhile, is really strong. She's a Swiss Army knife. You would like to destroy, if you're going to destroy something, Bast or Hood. Once in a while, you'll destroy Silver Sable or Falcon, as the case may be, or a Mysterio clone. Any of those are fine. She gives you occasional location control, occasional ways to surprise and get into locations your opponent couldn't. She is a ridiculous Swiss Army knife. A lot of how you compete in open deckless tournaments is having a surprise card, and Nico Minoru is that surprise card. Your opponent cannot know what she's going to do and when she's going to do it. Every time you bounce her, your opponent has to have a mini panic attack trying to figure out what different options you've got for her. From there's Toxin. Toxin, fundamentally being a 2/8, is actually huge for this list. That's a really great Iron Man lane, right? That is at least a 16 power Iron Man lane, but if you can get that Iron Man 3 more power, you've now got a 22 power lane from 2 cards, and then you can still do all your other nonsense. That's wildly powerful. That extra power on Toxin really does matter a lot, and you can even make it more by hitting with Bast, making it a 2/9, and then really singing. Falcon is a requirement in bounce right now. I know a lot of top players don't think so. I probably agree on ladder, but in an open deck list format, Cosmo is such a problem for this list, and Cosmo was so prominent because of all the Thanos that Falcon saying, oh, you Cosmoed a bunch of my ones. Yes, you stopped one bounce card, but now you don't have the other is really important. Derek showed me something I almost never do with Falcon, where he would like play Hood or Sable on 1, and then if he didn't have much to do, just Falcon on 2, so he had other options. I almost never do that. I was a fan of saving Falcon to later, but you can also bounce Falcon with your Toxin and Beast, and then do that again as the case may be. So there was a lot more Falcon on 2 than I'm used to, which is an incredible play. We've already discussed Mysterio. Mysterio is fundamentally a 2/9 if you can get it, but like that also is amazing for both bishop and monkey. Bishop, meanwhile, you play bishop on turn 3. Let's say you play 2 cards on turn 4, you have a 3-4. You play 1 card on turn 5, you have a 3-5. Then you play Mysterio, monkey, and a 1. Right? Let's just say you play at that point 5 cards. You had a 3-5. Now you have a 3-10. That's bigger than Gladiator. You're perfectly happy to have it. Also, once in a while, your opponent's going to do things like blow a red guardian on bishop, or blow red guardian trying to hit bishop, sometimes missing, sometimes hitting, which sucks. You're losing the power, right? But what that does is it makes your Iron Man a free play, especially again in open deck lists where you can use that to bait out moves. Hit Monkey is incredible power. Again, often playing for 311 or more. More if you hit that beast on a bunch of 1-drops, he can play for quite big. Don't feel like you have to be married to him. 311 is great, but Rocket and Groot at a 1-9 is pretty damn good. Playing 3 demons is 18 power. That's more than 11. So while Hitmonkey is incredible in this list and absolutely key to it, he's not pivotal. There's also the option to play Hitmonkey earlier, like Hitmonkey and a 1-drop on turn 4, and then bouncing that on turn 5. That is a viable play, one you can make, but it does let your opponent know that Hitmonkey is going to be in play, so keep that in mind. It gives them a more opportune time and ability to retreat. Beast is your best bounce card because it makes everything cheaper. It no longer does it for the rest of the game like it did once upon a time, but that's still very powerful. You can use it either early or late for this. It tends to be used either turn 4 or turn 5. Its 5 power is also not to be slept on. It's pretty decent. This is the only card in the deck, however, that is hit at a negative rate for Bast. Although, when you learn this deck, if you start playing this deck, you will have some trouble basting your hood. So keep that in mind. Sorry, basting your demons. So keep that in mind in terms of your play patterns. Try not to make your demons 1/3s. That is bad. And finally, Iron Man is how you go over the top. It is the only way you compete with power with a lot of decks. Outside of just putting up a bunch of points, Iron Man is absolutely stellar in this list. This list is significantly better if you don't expect a lot of combo decks. If the meta stays heavy Thanos, this does absolutely crush Thanos. Derek does not expect it to be especially good in regular hands outside of a lot of practice. He does not expect this to be especially good into the meta at large, but if you snap and retreat appropriately, you're going to win a lot of cubes with this list because opponents will consistently underestimate how much power you can output. I did manage to test this deck for a good bit today, and I won a lot, although Bounce is my longtime favorite archetype, so that might not be what you want to go on overall. All right, so Derek went 12-0 undefeated. There were 9 rounds of Swiss. He then won all 3 cut rounds in the Golden Gauntlet. Turn 1, you Bast if you have either Hood or Mysterio over Sable. Turn 2, 2 1s over Falcon. Turn 3 is Bishop over Bounce, and you can start to consider to snap around Bishop if you have a really clear curve. If you already have your Mysterio or a bunch of 1s and Bishop with Monkey, or you already have Iron Man, you can now start to consider snapping to pressure your opponent, especially, and the key here is if they're missing early curves. If you can sort of tell what they're doing, but they're missing their curve, that's a very strong snap condition. It's why Wiccan has always sort of struggled outside of Thanos in tournaments, because you can tell when Wiccan decks are missing their Wiccan curve, and that makes it very easy to snap against them. That's not the case here, but you can, if you see that with opponents and you're dropping bishops and have a clear curve, that's snapping. Turn 4, you'll play bishop and 1 happily, or you can just try and play a bunch of 1s to set up for next turn. Turn 5, you can beast for a bunch of free 1s or drop Iron Man. And at this point, you should be able to count your points. If you know how many points you have and you have a good idea, count your max point output for the opponent, you should be able to snap. Turn 6, Monkey, Mysterio, and 1s. And I have a major tip here. Try not to play for all 3 lanes here. What you're trying to do is compete really heavily for 2 lanes, let Iron Man in 1 giant lane be uncontested, and then wherever you think your opponent is less likely to play, don't try to beat their top power lane. Wherever you think your opponent is less likely to play, because you're Bounce, you have the flexibility to play in that spot. That is the Golden Gauntlet winner. We've got 7 more decks to talk about with commentary from everyone, including thoughts on the tournament, including from the tournament organizer. So don't go anywhere. But first, I'm going to let you know that we're giving away a season pass this week. This is your last chance to get a free Esme Cuckoo this week. Next week, we'll be giving away 5 of the next season pass, but we have an Esme Cuckoo winner announced later this video. If you'd like to enter to win Esme Cuckoo, all you have to do is sub, like, and I will ask you a question later this video. Leave that comment to win a free Esme Cuckoo. All right, next up we have Owie, who finished in the top 8. Owie, our French kind friend, is an absolutely great Marvel Snap player and content creator. Derek is not a content creator. He is a well-known player, but not a content creator. Owie is a content creator, and he finished in the top 8 with a fairly unique clog list. I'm not used to seeing Misery in clog, Daredevil in clog. He found his own brew of it and did really well with it. You can find Owie at twitch.tv/Owie. If you're looking there, there are 5 eyes. You can also just type in Owie Marvel Snap to find his YouTube. This deck needs Cannonball and Cape Bishop. Those two are your non-negotiables. Iron Patriot can be Victoria Hand or Strange Supreme. I know those are other high series cards, but sorry. If you're really feeling like getting spicy, you can try Magic, but that's usually in different versions that run stuff like Gore. Misery here can be Dr. Octopus. That does make your hood plays a little bit harder. Misery gives you a second out to Dr. Octopus, whereas Classic Clog only has the one out of Viper for Dr. Octopus. All right, Owie had a lot to say on why he chose Clog. So he had prepared Thanos Strange, Thanos Ongoing, and Ajax as the 3 decks. So Thanos Strange, Thanos Ongoing are decks we're going to see in the top 8. We were going to see so much Thanos. We're only going to see 1 Thanos ongoing. We're going to see 3 Thanos Stranges. Ajax did not make the top 8. Ajax was quite good, but there's just enough Super Scroll, just enough Cosmo, just enough other stuff to really hold it back. 10 minutes before the deck cut, I chose finally my Clog because it's the type of deck I have fun to play and stressful for my opponents in Conquest. So on ladder, a lot of what Clog does is it wins a lot of low Q games where you're winning 1 and 2 cubers from opponents who are good and retreat responsibly once they realize they're clogged. That's not an option indefinitely in Conquest. You have a limited number of lives, and thus Clog tends to be a very powerful play for Conquest. I just play principally this tournament for fun and support. I didn't want the rewards, and I'm giving them to a community member if Second Dinner lets me. He hasn't heard back from Second Dinner, but his plan is to give it away to one of his community members because, again, I told you Owie is kind of awesome. Basically wanted to go to sleep fast and name my deck Act de Presencia, and I don't want Thanos mirrors. So chose against Thanos because he won a fast deck so that he can get this tournament done. On what went right? I just played good. I have some bad matchups because Clog's not the better deck to choose with this meta, but I need challenge. So he literally chose this deck in order to up the challenge and because it eats Thanos. I played 4 Thanos and beat all of them. Won a Clog Classic. Yeah, beat another Clog deck, which makes a lot of sense because when you have Misery, you are favored into the mirror fairly heavily. Discard Bullseye, which is a little surprising. That is a rough matchup. If you can stop the Bullseye combo, the Dakin combo tends not to be as big a problem for this one. Excuse me. Move Bounce, and lose to Move Bounce and Ajax. So losing to Ajax makes sense here. You have a lot of stuff on the board that gets negative power, and that becomes sort of a problem, which makes sense. Beating a move bounce is impressive. It can go either way. That matchup can go either way depending on how effective the person is at using the bounce cards, and we'll talk more about the loss to move bounce later. What went wrong at the end? I lost to Derek in the. Oh, sorry. The move bounce he lost to in Swiss was Sizer, by the way. Shock of shocks, Sizer on move bounce. If you don't know who that is, don't worry about it. We'll tell you later this video. I lost to Derek in the quarterfinals in a very close match, that quarterfinals being the top 8, in which I felt good. But there were 2 decisive games where luck wasn't on my side. One with a leader created on his side with Iron Patriot, who copied my Cannonball and thwarted my game by a few points. So Iron Patriot gave yeah, so a leader randomly was generated that copied Cannonball, which is one hell of a way to lose. And the last one was a Nexus, where I managed to give him priority in the end, which was the key element of our match. But unfortunately, Cannonball didn't show up, and I lost by a few points. So not seeing Cannonball, if he had seen Cannonball, he might have knocked Derek out. But without Cannonball, there was no way to do so. Well done to him. His victory is deserved for all his investment in the game. In conclusion, the event was cool and well organized. The lack of cash prize is clearly a major flaw in the victory of a competitive event worthy of the name. To be honest, I had a feeling that it was less important and with less stake than a community event like there has been in the past. So, this is the first bit of feedback for Second Dinner from the more competitive portion of the tournament that they would generally prefer a cash prize, which I think is fairly obvious, but a cash prize might incentivize more competitiveness, more play. I know I chose a semi less competitive deck because in game resources meant less to me as well. From here, let's go card by card on his list. So the Hood has 2 uses here. It is a card where you can get multiple demons for Misery. Demons are just such a power card that they're worth running. The other thing it is with Viper, it operates as a Green Goblin. Titania is generally a play around turn 4 or turn 5. It is never a play on turn 1 in this list. Your goal with Titania is to, without priority, play it first and then play one of your Clog cards, whether that be Viper, Green Goblin, or an Acid Arrow. At that point, the Viper, Green Goblin, or Acid Arrow will take effect, pushing themselves over. If there's an extra spot there, Titania will go to that spot. If they don't have a move card, a bounce card, and had at least 2 cards there, they're clogged. At the end of the game, you play a demon or an arrow there. They lose 5 points, you gain 5 points, you win a lane for free. Shadow King is here largely to mess with Surfer and Strange Supreme. It's a really powerful late game play. Daredevil is an amazing call in this tournament. This is my favorite piece of the deck. If you know you are facing a good player and on turn 5, you get Daredevil snapped, it's incredibly hard to stay. A lot of what this deck does, a lot of what Clog does, is trap you in games you feel like you can't win. The Daredevil snap really, really does push up that pressure. Again, especially with Open Deculus, where like that Daredevil snap, you go, oh no, that means they have Enchantress. Oh no, that means they have Cannonball. It's very hard to bluff snap in Marvel Snap, but Daredevil is one of the few cards that allows it. Okay, Bishop gives you Acid Arrow, and thus she's in the deck. Having those extra ones are okay for getting back that Titania, but they're not really the point. Iron Patriot, again, we've discussed this earlier, gives you that element of unpredictability that many of these decks are going to have. Much like Nico does in the previous bounce deck, Iron Patriot gives you a card that you can snap on, or a card that you can win extra cubes with when your opponent isn't where you have it. Green Goblin and Debris are your two main clog cards. Green Goblin is your big single target, Debris is your wide clog card. They're really powerful in the list, and obviously your goal is to clog one lane. Viper is your other clog card. You are meant to try and Viper Hood if possible, but don't be afraid to Viper over a Kate Bishop, an Iron Patriot that's used, or even is necessary, a like Debris Rock. She's just a very powerful card to make sure you get a location clogged. The reason you really want to go to location clogged is because if you can win a clogged location, Cannonball without priority can almost always just win another location for you, which makes the list very easy to use. One of the problems Cannonball has, however, is ongoing cards. There's ongoing cards that don't grow until later that Cannonball will miss. Think Iron Man. Enchantress gives you power against those, and Misery gives you an upper hand in Clog Mirrors, while also giving you an extra out for Hood, and also giving you a double Debris once in a while, double Iron Patriot, which is a very powerful play. I don't actually reference this in the turn by turn because I'm not sure it's an Owie play, but I just want to quickly iterate the Burrs combo in which you play Hood on turn 1, whatever on turn 2, or put on turn 2, and then in the Hood lane on turn 3, you play both Iron Patriot and the Demon. Turn 4, if you Misery that location, you get rid of the Hood, you get rid of the Iron Patriot, but you still have a Demon and a Misery. A 14 power lane on turn 4 is fairly likely to give you an Iron Patriot card. At that point, you have a cheap Iron Patriot card, an extra Iron Patriot card, and a Demon, and you're very favored into that matchup. That is a potential snap condition that is worth keeping in mind. Our friend Burrs, a multiple-time top 10 player, told us about it. This is the only 7-2 deck that made the cut, but it had the best opponent win percentage by less than 1 point over the number 9 and 10 finishers. Really, really impressive finish, however, nonetheless. Turn 1 Hood, turn 2 Kate over Iron Patriot over Daredevil. Iron Patriot gives you a potential snap condition with this list. Iron Patriot gives you a potential snap condition with every list. Fundamentally, what Iron Patriot says is my opponent doesn't know what I have, and if I think I can bully them, if I think I can convince them that I have something powerful, I can snap it and they should run, at which point I get free cubes. And when their lives are limited in this type of format, that's very powerful. Daredevil is a snap, but obviously not until turn 5. You can see their plays and then lock in a snap, at which point they have a really tough decision to make, figuring out whether you're countering them or whether you're bluffing. Turn 3 is Debris or Goblin, and as soon as you realize you can have one location clogged, you should probably snap, because at that point, Cannonball feels game-winning, and you do want to lock them into losing at least 2 cubes at those points. You can Viper on turn 3 if Hood, although you tend to want to save that if not. Turn 4, Viper on Hood or Rocks, Misery on Hood, or if you must, a 2/2. Iron Patriot and Daredevil are fine here, and remember that if you do play Iron Patriot here, this is the last turn that you can play that card and still make sure you get the discount. Remember, however, that Mobius, if they have played it, does turn off the Iron Patriot discount. Turn 5, Last Clog. You can Cannonball if you need Enchantress and Shang-Chi last turn, but generally speaking, you would rather save Cannonball. Cannonball or Enchantress and Shadow King are your last turn play. You fit demons in around them as you must, as you need the power. But the idea is to play whatever counters the opponent and win the game at that point. Huge congrats to our friend Owie for an amazing showing. Way to go, friend. Before we go any further, if you're enjoying the content, we give you at least 3 brand new decks every single day on this channel. We haven't missed a day of videos in well over 2 years, so if that sounds like something that you're interested in, please hit that subscribe button. A like and a comment would also go a long way to helping the channel survive in the long term. Next up, we've got Thanos Supreme Tech, which is a Desmond list. Desmond is one of Korea's top players, arguably Korea's top player, along with another player named Johnson, who nearly made the cut, and he took a Thanos Tech list with a few interesting choices we'll talk about later, because I think this is a very cool version of the list. You can find Desmond at, youtube.com/Desmond Korea. So YouTube's Desmond Korea is how you can find this wonderful streamer. This deck needs three Thanos tech. This deck is, one of three Thanos tech decks in the top eight. We're going to go into more detail as far as a play-by-play and card replacements when we get to the top ranked Thanos. But because doing a turn by turn for three different of fundamentally of the same deck with a few different tech choices seems redundant, and I don't want to waste your time. So the last deck we're going to talk about is the top finishing Thanos tech deck, and we are going to do a turn by turn and card replacements then. Uh, Desmond lost to Naka in the Thanos mirror. Desmond is phenomenal, but mirrors are always rough. So Desmond, why he chose Thanos. Currently, Thanos is one of the most well-balanced decks. It performs evenly against most other decks, which is why I chose it. Makes sense. Desmond is the type of player who will always choose the meta. He's going to choose the best deck and make you beat him playing the best thing. It's extraordinarily challenging to meet Derek. There are a lot of tournaments in Korea. Johnson, one of Desmond's metamates, hosts the Johnson Cup, a countrywide tournament often, and Desmond always does extremely well in that. He's a phenomenal player. On what went right. After losing my first match in round 3, I went on to win every match afterward and made it to the top 8. Since matches were held from 1 a.m. to 9 a.m. Korea, I had to rely on energy drinks to stay awake and focused. So hey, we're going to talk more about time zones later. Some more players are going to have things to say about that. What went wrong at the end? The main reason for my loss was fatigue. The main bracket started well past 9 a.m., and my concentration completely broke down. I think I just wanted to finish early, which affected my play, the first and second rounds when I really needed to hold on. That makes an awful lot of sense. When you're exhausted, it's hard to focus. Fatigue is an issue in tournaments almost no matter what. Straight up, fatigue is an issue in tournaments, even if it is working in the absolute best time zones for you, which would probably be the Western time zone of the United States, which would be the best time zone because at that point you maybe have to be up a little early, right? But the tournament's ending like in the early evening, at which point you should still be relatively alert. Just playing Marvel Snap for what I think amounted to about 10 or 11 hours is a real big challenge. It makes perfect sense that, especially given the crazy times, that Desmond struggled here. Desmond further says, I had a great time participating in the tournament. In future events we scheduled during Twitch drops, I think that would gain even more attention. Yes. Oh my God. So there were between 2,000 and like 3,000 people watching on the main Twitch channel the whole day, and there were multiple streamers holding a couple thousand in their streams. I streamed basically all day as well. So if that were Twitch drops, I could easily see that doubling and really, really helping to grow the game. So I am very hopeful that the next time they do this, this is during Twitch drops. Watching the tournament was also really fun. Marvel Snap's current state is quite good, definitely better than it used to be. A lot of players are returning, so I hope we'll see more events and more tournaments in the future. And I literally teared up when he sent this to me. I'd like to dedicate this honor to Snap Judgments, who always works hard to keep the Marvel Snap scene thriving. And I really appreciate that, Desmond. Desmond has been a long-term friend and supporter of the channel. Thank you, my friend. I really appreciate you. So card by card, and then we'll move on to the next list as I try not to choke up. Sam Wilson is here for two reasons. First, you don't always see Strange Supreme. If you don't see Strange Supreme, having access to a 2/7 is very powerful. This deck is very weak to clog. Sam Wilson gives you a little bit of extra play against clog, once more, if you don't see Strange Supreme. Strange Supreme will likely eat the shield, but it could also just eat stones, leaving you a few extra turns of shield, and it helps you against that clog matchup. Strange Supreme is the most powerful card in the list. It just becomes big. Strange Supreme, despite how big it looks, plays as a 2/12. However, because it concentrates power in one lane, and you only have to win 2 lanes, what it feels like it plays for is far bigger, and how much power it represents in one lane is very hard to predict and contest. That unpredictability gives a lot of power. Thanos is a deck where you can fairly often figure out what your opponent is doing and how much power they're going to output, so cards like Strange Supreme are important. Shadow King in a deck with no Shang-Chi or Enchantress is very pivotal here as a way to just say, I need this power to go away. This doesn't give you an answer to everything, but it gives you an answer to a lot of mirror decks. This is a Thanos deck that is specifically teched to beat other Thanos decks, hence the Gorgon in the list. Gorgon saying, my stones all cost 1, but yours all cost 2 is incredibly useful and powerful. Cosmo is your protection against Strange Supreme, and protection generally from Surfer and Killmonger if you are accurate at predicting where these cards are going to come. Mobius is in every Thanos list because in the Thanos mirror, a lot of the time, who gets down Mockingbird determines who wins the game. It also just stops a lot of other powerful lists. We're going to see that combo was not a presence in the meta, largely because combo tends to die to Mobius, and Mobius is in almost every Thanos deck. I think it's actually in every Thanos deck we're going to look at. Red Guardian here is a powerful stop card. It says you cannot do this card. It hits everything. It's not like specific, and thus it is just an easy include. Our big surprise card, and you might be noticing a pattern here, surprise cards are real in top player decks, is Copycat. You cannot know what your opponent's Copycat hit. If you're playing Affliction, it could hit Luke Cage. It could hit an Iron Man in that bounce matchup. It can hit a Viper, which is deadly to those clog matchups. Because you don't know it until it hits the board, it is one of the best power and surprise cards in this type of meta. Super Scroll is not a surprise, but it does give you play, particularly into the Thanos Ongoing. Thanos Ongoing is one of the strongest meta decks in the meta right now. Iron Man has enough prevalence, and opposing cards like Mobius and Gorgon would give you a really hard time if you weren't able to Super Scroll them back. Super Scroll is not a regular feature in the control versions of Thanos, but I do think it's a very wise add. Wiccan lets you play everything, right? Wiccan is most consistent and successful deck right now is Thanos. Thanos really wants to play a lot of cards, largely to be able to play a lot of control and still have enough power to win the game. Wiccan allows you to do that. Mockingbird as a cheap 9 is not as good in Strange Supreme Thanos as she is in the ongoing Thanos, but she's still a very powerful card. You don't always see Strange Supreme, and sometimes you play enough stones to still have a 2 or 3 9, which is crazy strong. Thanos draws you cards, gives you stones that will feed your Strange Supreme, fills your curve so that you can Wiccan, and gives you a very often unkillable or can be played anywhere 5 or 6 12. He is an incredible card right now. He is, in my opinion, the best card in the game. This is our last look at Desmond's deck, but once more, props to my friend Desmond for an absolutely incredible showing. Before we go any further, if any of you are willing to come check me out, I stream pretty much regularly on twitch.tv/pulseglazer. I stream for like 11 hours the day of the tournament. I stream most days, so if you're interested in stopping by, twitch.tv/pulseglazer. Next up, we've got Thanos Ongoing, the only Thanos Ongoing, so we're going to do the full breakdown. This is from 121 Eggy, who finished within the top 8. This is the standard, or a version of the standard ongoing Thanos list. I actually covered a version that I believe is one card different from this in yesterday's daily video, recorded well before I knew that this would make the top 8. I just think that Kyara really has added an awful lot to this list. You can find Eggy at twitch.tv/121Eggy. This deck needs Sam Wilson, Goliath, Wiccan, Mockingbird, and Thanos, making it the most expensive deck we've looked at so far. But this is also probably one of the more consistent decks on the ladder right now. Kara can be Ant-Man, Armor, and Shadow King, and once more, stay tuned for just a little bit for some more changes because our friend Eggy is going to tell you about them. Eggy on Why He Chose Thanos. The main difference between my deck and the other Thanos ongoing decks is Kyara and Super Skrull. I cut Ant-Man and Speed in my old versions to swap to Kyara and Skrull, because I noticed there are a lot of Enchantress and some Killmongers in the meta. I sacrificed some power for more consistency. Makes perfect sense to me. There's also just a reason line of Killmonger, particularly in Silver Surfer, which is at least by wide acclaim, the second best ladder deck right now. So a lot of people were going to bring it to the tournament. A lot of people were going to find ways to play Killmonger. Having Kara is a powerful counter to that as well. On what went right, the timing on snapping went right as far as my Swiss rounds. Honestly, I lost more games than I won, but the cubes I gained is huge. Lose one cube and aim for more cubes. That's the tip for the deck in Conquest. So retreat fairly early and often when you don't have your stuff, but when you have your stuff, maximize cubes, snap aggressively, make them stay, and win more. Really, really great advice from Eggy. What went wrong at the end? The match I lost was to an Emperor Hulkling. Wild, which means he lost to Butt here. What went wrong was I lost to an Emperor Hulkling, the only player in the top 8 who played Emperor Hulkling. He transformed into an Goliath and scammed me for 4 cubes and Gore for another 2 cubes. That's 6 of the cubes that you lose, and at that point you're just playing behind. It was quite an unlucky matchup. Fair enough. Last thing that Eggy has to say, if you want to play Thanos Ongoing ladder, you can move Kyrie and Mobius to run Ant-Man and Captain America. Conquest, however, remains the same. Play this version as the best Conquest version, which is important as this week Infinity Conquest will be opening up. Card by card once more. A lot of this deck is built on its early scalers. Goliath and Dazzler both play for at least 2/8. That 2/8 can be further buffed by Blue Marvel and Spectrum, which is amazing. Sam is a measly 2/7, but having two different bodies attached to him, the Shield and Sam himself, means that it's +2 for Blue Marvel for putting this in the deck, and +4 for Spectrum. Very powerful. Cosmo is your main protection card here, trying to stop things like Silver Surfer and Killmonger when you don't have Kyra, while also offering you protection from Enchantress, which is in a lot of different versions of Thanos right now. Mobius once more, because so often that Thanos mirror is decided by who gets Mockingbird, and also to make sure that no surprise combo decks can survive. Kara is your other Killmonger tech, but it's also decent to protect Thanos or a Blue Marvel to Mockingbird, cards like that. Them not being shongable is reasonably strong here. Super Skull gives you whatever ongoings your opponent has. Very, very strong here. It is a mirror breaker and also gives you a positive matchup, particularly into the Affliction, where if you can steal their Luke Cage, you can steal their Ajax, you're going to win that matchup. Wiccan is not different here. Having the ability to play extra cards is huge, and Thanos remains the best Wiccan deck. Blue Marvel looks small, but you can very often in this deck in particular fill every single spot, which means he plays for a 5/14. That is significantly bigger than almost any other 5 in the game, and thus he goes here. While also being an ongoing trigger, which triggers Goliath, is +2 on Blue Marvel, and will be hit by Spectrum. If Blue Marvel is a 5/14, Spectrum is often even bigger. It's very hard to be, given that 3 of Thanos' stones are ongoings, not have at least 5 ongoings in play. If you have 5 ongoings in play, Spectrum is giving you +10 and playing for 6/17, but you often have far more than that, making Spectrum a ridiculously huge play. Remember, don't count stats only in one lane. Don't count stats only on your side. Silver Sable and Spectrum offer us a fairly clear example of that. Mockingbird here is just simply cheap 9 in this deck because you don't run Strange Supreme. She's often free 1 or 2, which is just crazy, and Thanos has the same use as before. This is the first deck that we've seen that doesn't run any particular surprise cards, right? This is a fairly straightforward deck. This deck doesn't run surprise cards because its job is to sort of output massive power. This is the power police of the meta. Because of Spectrum and Blue Marvel, because Dazzler, Goliath, and Sam scale so much, you end up putting out more points than anything with this list the high majority of the time when it does what it's supposed to. Although, an Goliath Emperor Hulkling will still get you. All right, so this went 8-1 in Swiss, but lost to Butt in the top 8. This is one of 4 Thanos, but the only ongoing. Turn 1, that made the top 8. There's obviously other ongoings in the tournament. Turn 1, you want Stone Draw. Turn 2, Sam over Goliath over Draw. Turn 3, Kyra, or you can make some early plays. You can also play Mobius or Cosmo. Basically, if you can tell what your opponent is doing at this point, you pick the right tech card, which is usually Kyra or Mobius, but sometimes you're going to realize they're probably not running Killmonger. You know their deck, right? So you will say if they're not running Killmonger, you don't need to play Kyra. If they're not running Shang, you don't need to play Kyra. If they're not running Cost Reduction, you don't need to run Mobius. Now you can just run some extra draw. You will, however, play Kara, Mobius, or Cosmo if they're the only 3 and you need to get that Wiccan out. Make sure you keep your Wiccan curve in mind. From here on, you Mockingbird as you can, and if you can get a cheap enough Mockingbird, that can be a snap condition. I probably should have said this earlier in the video, but now it seems like a good time. If you see a name written in green, that is a conditional snap based on what you're seeing. White is a fairly often snap when you're trying to bully or pressure your opponent. Turn 4, Wiccan over a combo of earlier plays. Turn 5, Blue Marvel is generally huge over Thanos, Skrull, Cosmo, Mobius, or Kyra. You're playing any combo of stuff at that point. Turn 6, Spectrum, if you're going to put a ton of points on. A lot of what you do on turn 6 is you threaten. What is my opponent going to do? Are they going to be playing Spectrum and adding 2 power to the whole board? Are they going to be dropping Thanos? Which lane are they suddenly going to have 12-ish more power in? And if that Thanos costs 5, 12 plus another card more power in? Or are they going to play like Cosmo and Sam, Goliath, etc., in order to really scam me out with a bunch of cheaper cards? Forcing that question on your opponent is how you win extra cubes with this list, and props to Eggy, a member of the Lamby Fam community, for doing such a great job. Our season pass question, if you'd like to enter to win the Esme Cuckoo, is simply, did you watch the tournament, and how do you feel about it overall? Answer that in the comments in order to win a season pass. There is a VOD of the tournament available at twitch.tv/MarvelSnap. If you're interested in going back and watching, I strongly urge you to do so. If you've never seen competitive Marvel Snap, you have absolutely no idea what you're missing. It is the best competitive game I've ever seen played. Just genuinely stellar stuff. If you're interested in one of my streams or my VOD of this very tournament, again, twitch.tv/PulseGlazer. I'm going to keep advertising that. I'm trying to grow the Twitch, sorry. Next up, we have Thanos Supreme Tech by Proflucci. This is another top 8 list. This is a Thanos control. I lied. I thought there was no Alioth here, but there is an Alioth here. So we're going to go into more detail in the top version of this as far as replacements once more, and we'll talk about card by card after we hear from Professor Lucci. Please note that this is a fairly different version than the first one we talked about, right? Most of the top end is different here. A lot of the lower end cards remain the same. This is the player that lost to Sizer in the top 8. Sizer is another player we'll talk about, obviously, when we get to the top 4. Professor Lucci is one of the bigger Marvel Snap TikTokers. He's an Italian player, tiktok.com/@Professor Lucci. Check him out. On why he chose Thanos. I chose Thanos because I think it's the most consistent deck in the game, and Strange Supreme resolves the auto clog problems that Thanos has. There were numerous clog decks that almost made the cut, and one that made the cut. Strange Supreme is very helpful for that matchup, although clog can overload Strange Supreme, giving too much. It is a fairly variance-heavy matchup at that point, though, on what Strange Supreme is going to eat. On what went right. I tested this deck from the release of Strange Supreme, so I'm really confident with it. I think this is essential, especially in an open list format. That makes perfect sense to me. You want, in an open list, a deck that you have played a lot, and if this is the main deck you've played with these cards for the better part of 2 months, you're going to do best with it. What went wrong in the end? Sad face. I was really tired in the 2 games I lost because it was like 2 a.m. in Italy, so I was sleeping a lot. Fair enough, friend. 2 a.m. in Italy is extraordinarily late. Some of us are getting a little older, and 2 a.m. is a rough thing. The final thoughts of Prof. Lucci is, thanks for the opportunity to play in the tournament. I liked it a lot, and it gives me a new strength for streaming and making videos. Awesome. Great to see more of Prof. Maybe next time, if the tournament is 6 to 8 hours, split it into 2 days. It would be better because I understand that they can't do a time that is good for all. And that's what I wanted to say earlier for time zones. They're not going to be able to get a time that's good for everybody, right? It's always going to be an awkward time for a lot of the players because that's how time zones in the world work, unless you're going to split the tournament into different time zones. And that's sort of a major ordeal, right? So the simplest way to do this kind of tournament, making it a big spectator event, is to split it over 2 days. So hopefully they take that into consideration. I'm unsure what other factors could mitigate that, but they have a lot on their plate, but it is worth considering. All right, let's go card by card. We've talked about Sam Wilson in this type of deck and Strength Supreme, so I'm not going to reiterate. Hopefully you saw that in the earlier section. Surge is here. Surge is very powerful in this list, but also fairly complicated to run. So part of what makes Surge so powerful is giving an extra power to cards is very dangerous for the opponent here. Your opponent being unsure whether they're going to get how to count their power because they're not sure what cards have that Surge bonus is very, very, very strong. Again, opponents will count power, and power in Marvel Snap games won and lost. Every time a card is nerfed by one, people go, that's not a real nerf. It is, I promise. So many games in Marvel Snap, especially for competitive players, we'll hear more about this later, are decided by people directly counting how many points you're going to be able to have. Surge messes with that math. Surge messes, if the opponent doesn't have Mobius, messes with the math of how many cards you can play. That kind of thing is how you win extra cubes. Surge doesn't seem like a surprise card. It seems like a consistency piece, but it can be played as a surprise card to win. Cosmo does the same thing here as always. Mobius does the same thing here as always. Red Guardian does the same thing as always. Shang-Chi is fairly simple, and that power must be controlled. You can fairly often take out opposing Strange Supremes and just mess with opponents, forcing them into suboptimal plays to protect from the Shang-Chi that they know is in your deck in an open list format. The same is generally true of Enchantress, who also just has more power. Wiccan is no different here than usual. This version of the list runs Alioth, Alioth being a very powerful counter at the end of the game. You can play games with priority where you can force your opponent into a damned if they do, damned if they don't, because you run Alioth, whether if you lose priority, they have to worry about Shang-Chi or Enchantress, and if you gain priority, they have to worry about Cosmo and Alioth, and that's an extraordinarily difficult place to put opponents into, a catch-22 if ever there was one. From there, we go to Mockingbird and Thanos. Mockingbird remains just cheap power here, and Thanos is no different than usual, forcing tough late game decisions, especially when he costs 5. Props to Proflucci for again a wonderful, wonderful performance. And from here, we continue on to If you like Marvel Snap tournaments, we host regular small tournaments called King of the Hill tournaments about once a week over on our Discord. Our Discord is linked in the description to this and every video we publish. If you're interested in checking it out, please do stop by. We have one of the kindest and most helpful communities around, so if you would like to learn to get better at Marvel Snap or just have some cool people to talk to the game about, or if you'd like to compete in some quick, like 2 to 3 hour tournaments, check out our Snap Judgments League's King of the Hill tournaments. From here, we go to Move Bounce. Move Bounce is Sizer's main deck. If you've ever seen this deck, just know Sizer created this deck originally, literally when Madam Web and Aranya came out. It took him, which is absurd, but it took him until this month to figure out that Sage was the right last card. He's tried like 7 different cards in that spot. I've talked about this list so much. Sizer is another good friend of mine. A few of my friends made it. Sizer is a content creator. Proflucci, Sizer, and Owie are the content creators we've seen so far. Sizer is a content creator. He streams on Twitch at Sizer2654. He is number 1 on the Infinite Leaderboard like 7 different times now. One of the best players at Marvel Snap, and again, one of my very good friends. Just awesome human being who created this deck that he has literally more games with this, I promise, than probably every other player in the top 10 has with their decks combined. You can find Sizer at twitch.tv/Sizer2654. This deck needs both Aranya and Madam Web. Sage can be Hulkbuster or Topaz, and Frigga can be Aranya or Topaz. I don't know why I said Frigga's name that way. It is late at night as I record, as it always is, my dear friends. All right, so Sizer's comments on why he chose Bounce Move. I personally feel it's the best deck in the game. Certainly the best deck for Sizer. It has a positive matchup versus all meta decks. I feel favored into Thanos, Scream, Surfer, Toxic, Surge, midrange, you name it. So Sizer tends to run at about a 65% win rate per season. He checked his stats into both Thanos and Scream recently and had a 57-58% win rate in the game. So it's worth knowing. I had a conversation with Sizer. He was like, what do I take into this tournament? And then we had a long conversation where I was like, dude, you've got thousands of games with this list. It's the list you're best with. It can go over the top of anything. You know how to play every matchup. Take the list. He took the list. He did pretty well. Top 4. What went right? I kept a good mental state despite having lost the first round to still make it to the semifinals. He lost to content creator JJ Rolk in the first round. JJ Rolk was running a deck that ran Storm, Legion, War Machine combos, which this deck has no real answer for. And so he lost in the first round and then did not lose again until the top 4. A really great run. What went wrong at the end? Fatigue, since it was like 4 in the morning my time, and to keep my A game going with one of the hardest decks in the game was rough. I would like it noted that this is the single hardest deck in the game to play. I don't think it's particularly close. If you are good with it, you can have a top win rate in any style of format, whether it be Conquest or Ladder, and against almost any matchup. But there's nothing quite as hard to play. You are going to need hundreds of games to learn this. Sizer also says it was a lot of fun. I can't wait to see what Second Dinner has in store for us in the future. Lambie Series, who is widely considered previously to be the GOAT in Marvel Snap before he stopped playing to move on to Parallel. He's a former number 1 player in the Infinite Leaderboard, and back when we had a lot of community tournaments, he was often in the number 1 spot. Of Sizer, he says he's the best player in the game. I was very impressed with how well he plays both Conquest and understands his deck. He's the best. He also noted that he thinks it would take him, Lambie himself, about 200 games to even crack this deck. It is that hard to play. He was wildly impressed with Sizer's play, once again noting exactly how amazing this player is. Another note in Sizer's belt after, in a previous tournament, I was watching him play this deck with Safety Blade, and Safety and I were having a chat, and Safety went, oh, Sizer's the best player I've ever seen. That's done now. So yeah, he's genuinely special with this deck. You should definitely check out his streams and watch him play it. He plays literally thousands of games with this. All right, so this list seems simple, but it is not. You have to plan early how much power you're going to get because draws are extraordinarily variable. What you have is ultimately 5 move cards. I can count once in a while. 5 move cards. You have Aranya, Ghost Spider, Iron Fist, Madam Web, and Doctor Strange. Those are your move cards. You need to use them in order to scale up the following, at least one of the following cards: Human Torch, Dagger, and Vulture. You can make those cards so big that they basically guarantee you lane wins, pending what your opponent plays in Dagger's case. But you can guarantee lane wins. That, however, opens you up to tech, right? It's easy to Shang-Chi a giant Human Torch. It's easy to Shang-Chi a giant Vulture or Dagger. Thus, this list runs the cards Toxin and Beast. If you've bounced those cards back, you end up with not priority, and you can play them late, safe from Shang-Chi. Extraordinarily powerful. Difficult to pull off, but extraordinarily powerful. The other 2 cards in this list are extra power cards. So if you see Human Torch and Vulture or Human Torch and Dagger in the right situations, this deck can feel very easy. But fairly often you're only going to see one move card because there are only 3 move payoffs. Frigga gives you an extra one of your payoffs, which is obviously incredibly strong. It will copy the buffed version, so a reasonable play for this list is something like Orania on turn 1, play Iron Fist, then trigger Orania and Human Torch on turn 2. You will then end up with a reasonably powerful Human Torch that you can just Frigga on turn 3. Bounce your Human Torch, remove some stuff, and you've now got a game-winning line of play. Sage is the other power card. It can be played early and bounced early and copied, or late as a power card to win games. Sage is utterly amazing in this list, just as a way to say, okay, I don't have to worry about moving. I've got this reasonably static lane that I just need a bit more power in. I need an extra 8 to 10 power in, and Sage just comes down and does that. You move a card like Human Torch, right? And then you drop a Sage, and then you're good to go. Or you move a Dagger and you drop a Sage, and then you're good to go. So Sizer went 8-1. Top 4, he lost round 1, and then not again until Naka in the top 4. I'm going to discuss my thoughts on watching Naka in the top 4 and the finals when we get to that final deck, so we'll get there relatively soon. Turn 1 is Aranya, turn 2 is Madam Web, and if they don't have an answer for Madam Web, if they're not running Red Guardian or Enchantress, you can snap it. Madam Web is incredibly strong. Once you're good with the list, you don't need Madam Web, but if you get Madam Web and they don't have an answer, you're good. Madam Web over a second move in Torch, or Fist for Vulture. Turn 3, Vulture Punch with Fist, or you can drop a move card on Madam Web. You can drop Frigga on a move Torch. If you're going to have 2 huge Torches and you have any bounce, you can generally snap. Turn 3, Sage, Frigga, or Bounce. Turn 5 is the same as 4. You need to decide something. If they're not running Shang-Chi, you can leave your giant bounce cards out, right? But if they are running Shang-Chi, you are going to want to bounce them and keep them safe. However, you can use bounce to throw priority. You want to use bounce to throw priority tech. However, if they don't run Shang-Chi, you can, instead of bouncing your your move payoffs, you can bounce your movers. You can bounce your Iron Fist, your Ghost Spider at that point, and by bouncing those cards, you can give yourself an extra mover on the last turn. Turn 6, replay movers win the game. This is probably the strongest list. If it were remotely easier to play, it would have been nerfed into the ground long ago. Props to Sizer for an absolutely great showing. Top 4 is nothing to sneeze at. And now, we're on to the Butt Squad. This is Pixie Hulkling. This is the strangest deck in the top 8, the coolest deck, but the way Cam Best on the stream framed it, but was the protagonist of the tournament, playing this completely wild deck, and we'll talk about his run and this deck and everything else about it relatively soon. So, you can find Butt at twitch.tv/ButtSquad888. Do not expect to see Butt streaming. Butt has streamed exactly once, as far as I can tell. He is an amazing player, but he is not much of a streamer. His stream had a bajillion people watching because he's an incredible and well-known community member. You might be new here. This is a different video. So if you've never seen this video before, sorry, my wife has decided that I should come to bed and has sent me a message. But if you've never been here before, we host a series of giant tournaments called the Snap Judgments League. They get hundreds of players, and in this league, it's basically a tournament set in pods that has a top 8 at the end. But has won 2 of those tournaments, the only player to ever win 2. This deck needs Nico, Emperor Hulkling, Legion, Copycat, and Pixie. Surge and Sam can be Jeff, Cable, or just good strong 2s. Uncle Ben can be Makari or Shadow King. As I now cannot click away. All right, Butt's comments on why he chose this. I don't know how to explain this deck. Why he chose this Pixie deck. First, he says, "I like chaos in an open decklist format where in the later rounds the really good players can usually perfectly calculate output. This gives you an edge." Uncle Ben and Killmonger was the Thanos deck. Again, assuming that Thanos would be a very prominent deck in the meta. It is 1000% worth remembering here what we said earlier. Good players can perfectly calculate output. They will know how much power you are outputting into the meta. They know what your plan is to play. Good? That is the skill, if you're struggling with Marvel Snap, that you need to work on. Predict what your opponent's doing. Know the meta well enough to predict what you're doing, and play the game. Sorry. Know the meta well enough to predict what your opponent's doing in most games and say, I think they're going to have this much output. In open deck list, that's not even that hard to do, right? You can literally look at their list and say, the best play they have is this. Can I beat that? Cool. on what went right. But says Thanos actually felt like my easiest matchup. I played a lot of Thanos gamers, and those gamers mostly went the best. Those games mostly went the best. I will say one thing that certainly went right was that I won a match when I had an awful starting hand and limped in. Opponent was on lethal, but scammed the game out by Galactus Hulkling on Danger Room. His Thanos died, Hulkling didn't, so lucky there. I still had cubes remaining if I lost that game, but that certainly went right. But messaged everyone, including me, when that happened. It was really great. He was just like, won a game on Emperor Hulkling Thanos. He was very happy with his Hulkling all day. Let me just tell you. We heard already about how Hulkling won him his top 8 matchup as well. I didn't. What went wrong in the end? I didn't play well in the last game against Derek. First, for a cuber I lost, I stayed in on the snap, thinking I could Legion Sakar, and that would disrupt his bounce play. But that's not how Sakar works. If you Legion Sakar, in fact, nothing happens. It doesn't do anything extra. But I knew better, but I forgot in the moment. Long tournaments, that kind of thing happens. I also gambled a turn one bluff snap, knowing Derek is pretty disciplined and retreating, which is also worth knowing. Um, Derek and Butt are among the same player groups. A lot of top player groups interact. So he and Butt know each other well. He knows that Derek will just discipline and retreat when he doesn't feel favored. But at that point, Derek had a good hand, so he stayed in. Frankly, I should have been way more patient and waited for a high roll, but after 10 hours of tournament play, my brain was shot. Fair enough. And that's no excuse because as tired as I was, it was like 3 a.m. for Derek. Reasonably noted, as Butt is a West Coast Americas player, so he had the better time zone, but Derek ended up playing more disciplined Marvel Snap. A PSA here from Husky Puppies 35. Husky Puppies 35 is another top player and top streamer if you don't know him. Husky says, this is a competitive tournament deck made for open deck lists, not ladder lists. This is not a list that you are meant to play on ladder. It is not nearly as effective on ladder. When you know what your opponent has, when you know what your opponent is trying to count, that's when you play this. For example, let's talk about the most decks run one surprise card. Nico Monaro, we've discussed as a surprise card multiple times here, right? Nico Monaro being able to change locations, being able to do all these things is a powerful surprise card. Pixie says you cannot possibly know what my power output can be at the end of the game unless you play Mobius. I could play a Magneto and an Enchantress. How could you possibly know? That kind of thing is incredibly powerful. Pixie is your second surprise card. Surge we've discussed as a sort of secret surprise card as well, right? Copycat we've discussed as a surprise card as well. And then Emperor Hulkling, the ultimate surprise card, has won games by being everything from Gore to Goliath to Galactus. No other card can do that. This deck is running a massive amount of surprise cards and is incredibly, incredibly strong for it. Uncle Ben is here as tech, as noted by Butt, with Killmonger. The tech here is that not only do you get to destroy the opponent's board, you get to disrupt their play patterns with Killmonger. Incredibly powerful duo. Mobius is here largely for Pixie. If you go Pixie Mobius, you always get the better cost, but it's also a decent counter into the meta. Enchantress, you only get Enchantress or Shang, but chose Enchantress. Enchantress almost always has at least a few good targets against Thanos decks, including since the rise of Kyera recently in Thanos decks, especially Thanos ongoing decks, Enchantress has more value, especially if you're running Killmonger. Legion is the ultimate scam card. Legion, if you've never played with or against Legion in a Conquest matchup, it is so hard to play around. What are these locations going to be, and how will that affect things? Emperor Hulkling is just big power, and then Magneto is the best core 6 that doesn't give your opponent any extra information. Gore is really big against Thanos, but if you're running Killmonger, that really does shrink Gore. Red Hulk gives your opponent information. Magneto is the perfect combination of both power and disruption. And of course, the real MVP, Emperor Hulkling. So top 4, 8-1. Both losses but had were to Derek. The first loss was the King of Swiss match. If you're not aware, for anyone who's new to tournaments, Swiss rounds are what the rounds before the cut are called. They're the rounds that determine who makes the top 8. Where if you win a game, you play another player who won a game basically until the end. The goal of these is for there to be only one undefeated player. At the end, the very last round is for 2 players to determine who that one undefeated player was. At that point, Butt played Derek. Derek won. In the semifinals, Butt played Derek again. Derek won again. Uncle Ben is the turn 1 play, turn 2 Pixie, and at that point the turn by turn is utterly useless. Versus Pixie can be a harder play against Thanos. You'll play it, but if they play Mobius and you don't, you're in trouble. So strongly consider whether you want to. You might want to just Surge over Sam. Turn 3 Mobius is better than a 2, and you can copycat when you have the right target. You want to try and hide copycat, but you fit it when you can. Remember, surprise cards are there to be surprising. Turn 4, 2+2 or Enchantress, or at this point you can play Monger and Uncle Ben. Turn 5, we're looking to Legion. We can also go 3+1 or Enchantress. Again, sometimes we're going to Pixie and drop like a Magneto or a Hulkling here. Then turn 6, Magneto or the Shock of Shocks, Emperor Hulkling. This is a Pilot's deck. I have this conversation with Cam fairly regularly where I'll feature a Butt or a Derek deck, and he'll be like, only Butt and Derek are good at them. And I don't think that's true. I do, however, think that you have to have a very particular style of thinking in order to succeed with Butt and Derek decks. And I don't think it's actually the same particular style of thinking. I am very, very, very often dominant with Derek decks, but Butt decks are real hit or miss. Some of them I absolutely crush with, and some I don't. But depending on how your brain works, you will have different levels of success with this list. Feel free to give it a try. But if it doesn't work, it's not the deck necessarily, especially in Conquest. It is how you choose to think about the game or how your brain automatically ends up thinking about the game. Our season pass winner from our very last season pass of last week is Shap Attack. Please reach out to me. Again, come check out a stream. Told you I was going to announce it one more time. Next up, Thanos Supreme Tech. This is Naka's deck. So this is the one that reached the finals. I want to talk quickly about Thanos before we talk about this deck in particular and Naka's thoughts. So first, Thanos was 4 of the top 8, which is obviously the most. That is 50% of the top 8, but it was not 50% of the meta. It was something more like 40% of the meta, so it was overrepresented. Its win rate overall did not look especially good. A lot of people played Thanos and sort of died. Thanos, however, is the meta right now. It is the thing that every single player, whether they choose to be competitive or not, knew would be the most prominent and represented thing. Everyone knew they were going to see either they were either going to have to play Thanos or run into Thanos being expecting to play against a lot of Thanos. Hopefully that makes sense to everyone. This sets the meta. This is the tier 0. This and the ongoing version of Thanos are the tier 0 version of the meta that everything is played in response to. All the changes Derek made to his deck were for Thanos, but was able to take and succeed with his deck because it hard counters Thanos. That is fundamentally the use and the use and focus of the meta right now. Now, Naka took a particular version that we will talk about as we go forward. You can find this player at twitter.com/fightingnagisa. This deck needs Thanos, Strange, and Wiccan. Red Guardian, Sam Wilson, and Loki can be Shadow King, Road, Copycat, Super Skull, Iron Patriot. But honestly, rewind the video or pull up the decks. The link to them is in the description to the video, and you can do what you want as far as just mixing and matching all these lists. Mockingbird here can be Sasquatch. I don't love that replacement, but if you see Strange Supreme, Mockingbird can be a little awkward, and you can sometimes just play a bunch of stones and make Sasquatch cheaper. So Naka's comments. Why he chose Thanos. I like decks that are highly adaptable, and I think the cards that allow you to fight back are particularly effective in open deck battles. That makes perfect sense to me. On what went right, anticipating that there would be many Thanos decks among my opponents, I decided to use Cassandra Nova, which proved to be a good idea. That likewise makes sense. If you know you're going to play a lot of Thanos, again, the tier 0 deck, Cassandra Nova is very good. She plays as often a 3/8, 3/9, or bigger in Thanos matchups if you play her on turn 3, while also weakening the stones, making them useless a lot of the time. What went wrong at the end? It's true that we struggled to stay focused during the long tournament, but that's something we all share. I think my opponent was better at reading the game. We'll talk about that at the very end when we get to the last slide of this deck. I'm going to talk about the semifinals and finals, Naka's games against both Sizer and Derek. Finally, I'd like to express my deepest gratitude to the organizers who made this official tournament possible. We're still going to hear from 2 of them, my opponents, and everyone who supported me. Thank you. Such a kind person. Naka is the only player that made the top 8, I believe. Who actually Naka and one other, and oh my god, I lost the name. Please excuse me. There's 2 players in the top 8 who I wasn't previously friendly with, but got to get to know new people as always. So Loki is brilliant tech here. Loki is a tier 0 deck play. Loki is here for the Thanos mirror. So Loki in the Thanos mirror gives you just their other cards, not their stones, like just their base cards, not their stones. So it's this incredibly powerful play. You now just have their deck cheaper without needing the extra draw because you're just drawing the best stuff in their deck on the cheap. It's really, really strong. One of the problems Naka ended up having that we'll talk about is that he Loki'd against decks that I'm not sure he was quite as good Loki against, but you don't always have other choices in the meta. Sam Wilson is, again, the same card as he has been throughout, a 2/7 that helps you against Clog while also being good Strange Supreme food. Strange Supreme remains this really big thing. Cassandra Nova is incredibly. Oh, sorry. Loki is your surprise card here, right? Once you've Loki'd, your opponent cannot know what you have. They cannot calculate your power output, and now you have extra equity into the game. Again, surprise cards in almost every one of these decks. Cassandra Nova, we've discussed, just really, really big into Thanos, and just a decent play on 3 otherwise. Cosmo is your protection card. Well, he can also completely screw up opponents, particularly stuff like bounce. Meanwhile, we have Mobius and Mobius for the mirror, and for stopping, again, things like bounce. His discounts are very strong. Red Guardian is your catch-all control card. Shang-Chi is power must be controlled when things try and get too big for you, and Enchantress is when things that are ongoing try and become problems. Wigan lets you have the ability to play all of these cards, in particular all of these control cards. Mockingbird is cheap power, and Thanos we've talked about 10 different times at this point. So this is 8-1, losing in the finals to Derek as the second loss. Turn 1, draw over Loki, and make sure you know what your opponent's deck is in Loki. Again, not a concern in open deck list. Turn 2, Strange over draw. Strange can often be a snap, depending on what the likely power output is and what your hand is. Turn 3, Cosmo and Strange, Mobius or Cassandra Nova. Mockingbird, as you can, is very good from here on out. Turn 4, you want Wiccan over earlier plays. And then the last 2 turns are fundamentally the same. You want Thanos, Shang Enchantress, or Red Guardian. And if you play them, you want to play whatever else you can with them. Make sure you do these, and you should be able to win a lot of games of Marvel Snap. Now, in these semifinals against Sizer, there was a moment in the second game where Sizer ended up losing 4 cubes because he completely mistimed it, and instead of retreating, he made a quick rushed play with the timer running down. One of the problems with playing an extremely technical deck like Bounce Move is you have to think through like 15 different plays, and there is a fairly strict timer on Marvel Snap, and thus Naka was able to get that win over him. That's huge, right? That is one of the key ways that Sizer was able to steal that game. The next thing that happened was they punched back and forth until they were both down to their final life. On the final life game, Sizer may have been able to win, but there was the location that closes after turn 2, not allowing plays, terrible for bounce move, and then the that was the left location, and the right location was the lockjaw location. I don't remember what the names of these are, but you know exactly what I mean, right? You put a card in, it pulls a card from your deck out. Both of those heavily favor Thanos. Sizer might have been able to win, but at that point, he's so unfavored that he is going to absolutely struggle into the matchup. He played a very high roll deck that had high location variance. While Sizer's deck might have been stronger and he might have been more practiced with it, the location and variance and complexity of his deck was matched by the consistency and power of Naka's deck. In the finals, we almost had a fairly similar situation where it was fairly clear that Derek's deck was able to put up more power more consistently. In the last life situation, once more, both of these games came down to a very last life situation. There was a New York game, and Naka had Enchantress. He decided to play Enchantress on the on the far right location, which is where Iron Man was, moving Cosmo to the left to do so. Derek decided to move Iron Man to the left. That's where the Cosmo went. Derek was able to win the left through the power of that Iron Man. If the Enchantress had come on the left New York location and Cosmo had stayed on the right location, the win would have gone to Naka. It comes down to just that much reading the opponent, reading the game. All of these top players played phenomenally well in extremely trying circumstances, coming down to the smallest of decisions, the smallest bits of consistency, the smallest bits of read, and the smallest bits of luck and variance. Huge props to all of our wonderful Marvel Snap players. Now let's hear from the people who ran the tournament. It's not actually a question of the day, but Loki will always be here for that old school Loki. So Gunny T, where the T stands for, this is Gunny's statement to the community. If you don't know who Gunny T is, he is fundamentally the head TO of Marvel Snap at this point. He organized our Snap Judgments Leagues, he organizes the Crown, and now he organizes the tournaments for Second Dinner. So huge props to our friend Gunny, who's going to have a message for the Marvel Snap community, and then for our Snap Judgments League community. If you're, again, new here, please feel free to join our community in the Discord in this video. I personally am beyond words with how grateful I am for being given the opportunity to bring competitive Marvel Snap to the community. You all put your trust in us, and together we crushed it. I look forward to working with the community again in the future. to the Snap Judgments League family. You'll have a special role in this achievement. With your help, we have sharpened the tournament scene and solidified the process that allowed the Golden Gauntlet to happen. Without your support, competitive Marvel Snap would still be a fleeting thought. So, what I'm going to add is Gunny did it, but we all did this. We all helped. We all supported. We've made competitive Marvel Snap a reality. It's awesome. Gunny's right hand man in all these things is our friend Models, the Mod Supreme. He is the mod of our community who has long been a major supporter. He helps run all the tournaments and indeed helped run all the back end of this tournament. What he says is he just wants to thank everyone for the support and making it possible. I'm blown away by the plays I saw, and getting to be involved is still surreal. And to you and SJ specifically, that's me, thank you for making it possible for me to do any of this. My note, from this point, we're going to have a second dinner update very soon. We will have more competitive Marvel Snap soon. This is seemingly, hopefully, likely only just beginning. I did speak to Second Dinner. They are unprepared to comment at this time, but I should have a comment. What I was told was ideally later this week, so please stay tuned to the show. I'm hoping to get that comment this Thursday on the podcast, Snap Judgments podcast. We're going to have Gunny T, who obviously helped organize it, and Super Tech God, who helped organize it and casted much of the tournament on the podcast in order to discuss the Marvel Snap tournament scene. And I'm hoping to have an update for you by then. So please make sure you stay tuned for the future of competitive Marvel Snap. Thank you all for watching. Before we go, we have a Patreon and certain tiers of support. Get a thanks on every video. So if you're interested, please check out patreon.com/snapjudgments. And thank you to Bricks2Click, Abigail Giesland, Mandatory Burnout, Irregardless, LAB, Inc., I Am Frostman, Hota Navarrete, Thinking Poker, Primed Ryan, Ryan Burke, and Ryan Wood, Renwrench, Caretixley, Koire, Kazuchi, Archangel 3K, Black Dahlia, Pyrofros, The Goat Seeker, Code, Hollowed, Only Fox, Synth, Fratnick, Absolute Shannon, Nightmare, Dirty Casual, Mr. Kerfuffle, Cables, Ginger Prime, Philip Rakovich, who I invited to the tournament and finished in 10th place. We're going to look at Philip Rakovich's deck tomorrow, so make sure you're here for it. Haplo, Kenny Loggins of the Danger Zone, The Bizza, Black Jeebus 23, Exorus V and Skippy G, rhyming friends, Jessica Gamble, Mr. Slush Death, The King of Bros, The Great Kazoo, Werewolf, Kevsey Hoda, Lunar Chris, Clam, Colonel Forbin, Rob Silverman, M. Holland, David G. Wingfield, Steven, Brian Kaufman, Tristan H. Martin, Jason B., Mr. Craig Sterry, Matt V., Corey, Corwin, John Q., and Jimmy McHugh, Yistout, A Sage, One Big Man, Milkman for Reals, Cactus Jack, Reapser, BG, Quid Pro Joe, Snap Decisions Joe. Check out the Snap Decisions podcast, please. The best daily Marvel Snap podcast. DeCarlo, who's on Twitch, go check him out. Models Mod Supreme, we just heard from. Congrats again to Models. Boombot, Green Goblin, Unibot, Flan56, The Fuzzy Dunlop, Spectrumix, Hoot, Ocularis, Matt H, DJ Mikey Hijinks, No Flex, Nick the Greeky. Check him out on Twitch. He'll also be on the podcast with us. Toxic Soul King, our wonderful friend on Twitch, who had a great showing in the tournament and was on the podcast last week. That is up from Saturday's video. Zodrex74 on Twitch. The King of Canada JJ on Twitch. Denman Falcon, a wonderful YouTuber. Fothlar Newman, who's on Twitch and YouTube, and if you like Regis Kilbin's content, you should absolutely check out Newman. Jonesy of the Triple Threat on YouTube, a hilarious and underrated show. Our friend Two Ties, who ran the whole back end. Congratulations to Two Ties for being the main mod and, putting on his two ties for the whole long day. The great Lauren Whatevs of the Snap on This podcast, one of the most delightful cast of characters in the game, and Lauren Whatevs is one of the principal creators responsible for making the game better. The Pirate King Tucker, a new father who deserves our love and support, over on Twitch and YouTube. And of course, Gunny T, where the T stands for. Thank you all for your wonderful support. Thank you to Gunny, to Second Dinner, to Models, to Guest, to Tech, to Two Ties, to everyone involved for making Marvel Snap's competitive scene a reality. Much love. See you tomorrow for another Snap Take. Peace.